All right, guys, we're back. We are back. It's Monday night. It's Soul Talk. And yeah, I know we said we're going to do Soul Talk on Thursdays, but man, oh man, Kelosal, could we pass it up today with this video that got launched today?
Not with this.
I couldn't wait till Thursday, could it?
Yeah.
So we said tonight we were going to drop in and talk a little bit about what we saw today. There was an interesting video that CIG put out. I got to say this, Kelosal, I'm actually kind of happy with the fact that CIG is doing this like during Invictus, you know, just kind of dropping these little tidbits here and there. They did that once before. I don't know if it was it Invictus last year or the convention where they dropped that thing in when Brian Chambers, and I remember nobody was expecting it, and they dropped that video in with Brian Chambers and Chris talked about stuff with Squadron 42. Remember last year?
I cannot remember.
But it was during an event, is my point. You know, it was unannounced. It wasn't a part of ISC or anything like that. So it looks like they kind of decided to do that again this year because people have been talking about what's going on with this whole quantum thing, right? I mean, people on our show, we talked about it before, Kelosal. People were wondering even if Quanta was going to, you know, make it out this year.
Right. And I think on the last show, we had a couple of people that were talking about something in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
And I did mention, I don't know if it's this show that we just had yesterday on Sunday or the previous Sunday. And I told somebody that will all depend on quantum. Yeah. And now we see Tony Zurovec putting out another piece of a 40-some odd minute piece of information, valuable information. I think I got the part 3 drift.
Okay.
And so I'm interested in sharing the rest of it with you and having that conversation.
Well, I watched the video once, and I think I suggested to our people it's going to probably take you 3 times to get it all in, because there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of good information. The good thing about this was, and I think one of us said this before, that even though 2019 was that last big talk that Tony did at CitizenCon, we kind of said we haven't heard from him, but we also said maybe that's good because he's not going to say anything until there's something to be said. In fact, I remember at that 2019 convention, he talked about the fact that he really didn't want to come forward and say anything until he could report some progress. And we definitely hear progress in this particular video. They called it Quantum, Quasar, and Virtual AI. The Quantum I wasn't surprised about. The Virtual AI I was impressed about. But the Quasar thing caught me off guard. What did you think, Kelosal, about that third factor, that other factor? Were you expecting him to talk about that?
So that's where I'm at.
Okay, you're on that part. Okay, that's the part you're on. Okay.
And the reason why it's taking me so long to view the whole thing is because I have been rewinding it multiple times.
You must have watched it straight through the first time. I know you kept catching stuff and grabbing bits right as you're going through.
Well, I'm a type of person. I'm kinesthetic.
Yeah.
And I have to write things down, and I have to touch it, and I have to be able to understand it.
I got you.
So if you just speak it out, it's going to go in one ear and go out the other. So I have to really sit down and start. Okay, let me stop. Let me rewind.
Yeah.
Let me write this. Let me understand this, because I'm not an economist, and although I play that in the game. So it's just nice to go ahead and get that. So that's why it took me so long. I should have finished this probably about 2 hours ago, or at least an hour ago.
First of all, I don't think it took you long. It's a 40-minute video. And to be honest with you, like I said, I feel like I need to watch it 3 times. I know this next time I'll suck in more. The first time was a lot of enthusiasm. This time I'm really listening. The time after that will be when I'm checking to make sure that I heard everything that I thought I heard. You know what I mean? So we're talking 2.5 hours of listening. So believe me, I think personally, if you spent that much time going through it the first time, you did well, because Tony Z is not necessarily someone that you just kind of can sit and absorb in one conversation, at least to me.
At
least to me. Yeah, I think you're kind of fooling yourself if you think that's the case. So anyway, listen, as always, if you guys want to join in with us on the conversation, you guys can follow the link that's on the page for being able to come in and talk with us. You're more than welcome to do that. But Kelosal and I are going to go through today's video. It's a 40-minute video, and we are going to stop. There are 4 sections to it. Well, really 3. And we're going to stop at each one of those so we can reflect, because there's no way we're going to get to the end of this video and then come back and talk about what was going on. So we're going to talk about the sections as we go through them. So, Kay, are you ready? If you're ready, we'll jump into it.
Yeah, let's go for it. I'm just
you good?
My phone.
Okay, no problem, no problem. All right, here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Tony Zurovec, and I'm the Director of Persistent Universe for Star Citizen.
Today
I'm going to give you an update on how some of the back-end architecture and systemic functionality is coming along, what sort of progress we've made over the past year, what's on the horizon, and how all of this is going to impact your gameplay experience. In order to give you a more comprehensive understanding of the long-term direction and what all of this will ultimately mean, I'm going to cover areas that are in various stages of development and will sometimes resort to illustrative examples so that the underlying concept can be made more clear. First, a quick review.
Okay, I heard you say you're not getting audio. You still not getting audio?
The game universe, and its purpose is to
I'm getting audio.
The price of goods at a given shop, what currency near a landing zone, or what missions are being offered, to evolve and change over time in logical and realistic ways. It does this by simulating hundreds of thousands of lightweight NPCs called quanta, whose AI logic is focused on just those aspects needed to produce the required information. Based upon a small list of attributes, each quanta makes its own decisions using the same resources, shops, and jobs as players. The simulation will need to calculate many millions of decisions per minute, and thus the AI behavior of quanta is focused on the most economically impactful details, which lets quantum focus all of its processing power on just those things that truly matter.
Okay, I'm going to stop here real quick. Kelosal, if there's something you want to stop at, like literally, we'll do it during this. That makes sense?
Right.
If there's something you say, Griff, stop it right here, we'll do that, okay? Because I think that'll be the better way to tackle Tony Z. I think this isn't like ISC, so I want to start it back up again. Hey, Kate,
no problem.
Good to see you. Here we go.
Every quanta possesses its own unique set of attributes that influence how well it performs and how it perceives opportunities. The initial implementation of attributes will have two main categories: proficiencies and traits. Proficiencies act like a multiplier on how well quanta perform a given task. Different jobs will require different proficiencies, and higher proficiencies will equate to superior execution. Traits describe what kind of jobs a quanta prefers to do by modifying their perceived value of the job. Each job will have a specific alignment, and when a quanta's traits match up with the job's alignment, they will perceive the payout of that job to be higher. To illustrate the concept, let's take two jobs on either end of the aggression scale and suppose, for now, that they pay out the same. Now, let's create a quanta with an average aggression rating. This quanta is no closer to the aggression alignment of factory worker than they are to security, so it's no surprise that for this quanta, the payout for both jobs looks the same. However, as we decrease the aggression rating of this quanta, we can see that the perceived amount of money for both jobs changes. Again, the actual pay hasn't changed at all, only the perceived value from that quanta's point of view. It's still possible for the quanta to choose security, but in this case, security would need to pay 4 times as much. If we change this quanta's aggression trait to be very high, the opposite happens. Now, the aggressive security job looks like it pays much more, and the peaceful factory worker jobs appear to pay much less. Of course.
Okay, pardon my ignorance, but that's really cool. And to see how he builds on that with the other 3 factors is pretty amazing to me. Unless I'm just ignorant. I might be ignorant about the whole game design thing, but Kelosal, do you know if this is kind of like the normal way it works, or is this something unique that he's created?
As far as this may be something unique that he's created for Star Citizen.
Okay.
I think it probably could be a pretty patented, basic plan that normal, companies put in place.
I get it in relation to like if you're doing like a game like a combat game, right? With enemies and like that. But I don't think I've ever seen it done in the sense of NPCs and economy. You know what I mean? I don't know if I've ever seen NPCs driven this way. Definitely I can see how the high aggression, low aggression in combat scenarios makes sense. It's just I just never thought about equating that to economy, which is kind of blowing my mind a little bit.
Yeah, he's got several different types of facets. I think we're kind of ahead when we start the video because I missed the whole definition of quantum.
Oh, okay. When we started back? Okay, yeah, no problem. Let's go.
I got it.
Okay, you got it.
But I wanted us to at least go over and explain it to everybody what quantum is.
And quanta.
Going into quanta.
Yeah.
Because I think we're at quanta right now.
Yeah, we're at quanta, right. Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
If we change this quanta's aggression trait to be very high, the opposite happens. Now, the aggressive security job looks like it pays much more, and the peaceful factory worker jobs appear to pay much less.
I just think it's amazing
how he
starts off explaining what quantum is. And quantum and quanta are two different things that rely on each other.
Right.
And, he explains that quantum is a simulation of a game universe to allow certain things.
Right.
And those certain things are, things that can range from price of goods to shop, to the amount of piracy, landing zones, or whatever missions could be offered, right?
Right.
And these are all meant to evolve the change over time in a logical and realistic way. So these are the big words they've thrown out. All right. So in other words, this is a procedural generated system that dictates the type of things that that I just said. And it also brings in the type of NPCs that he calls VNPCs.
Right.
Which is the virtual AI.
Right.
Okay.
Quantum is the entire system.
Correct.
Quanta is the individual, particular whatever it is that's operating either in the back end, right? The entity, right? Exactly. Yep.
Right. Yep. I just wanted people to understand that part because the question is, I know he says that we're going to put a couple of iterations in game. I would argue that it's kind of already in there a little bit.
Wait, that's what he kind of inferred, that they have begun implementing it, right? And now he said in the next patch it's going to start coming out in the next patch in small, like you said, in small portions.
Correct.
And they're going to continue to add to it. J2 said detailed background simulation is fairly common. Limited game AI is fairly common. The seamless shifting back and forth between systems is not. Okay, good. Okay, got you, J2. Thanks for that. Unless he's thinking about something else being explained. When you say quanta, that's plural of the quantum, so it refers, I think, to the individual. Right, that's what we were just talking about. Yep. Okay, quantum is the components making up the group of quanta. That's why I said the whole system. NPCs are the individuals. Yep, gotcha. Okay, here we go, guys. We're going to try not to interrupt it too much, but there's a lot here, as you guys know, so bear with us.
Jobs have more than a single trait to distinguish themselves. Suppose we take another aggressive job, pirate. With just one dimension, the pirate job would look just as lucrative to this quanta as the security job. We can differentiate between these two jobs by adding the morality trait and putting both of these aggressive jobs on the proper place on that scale. Now that all jobs have a unique combination of trait alignments, we can watch the perceived payout for all three of these jobs change, even though, in this case, all jobs actually pay the exact same amount. We're currently experimenting with 4 different traits, but expect to add at least a few more over time to help ensure that quanta do not congregate around the highest paying job at any given moment, and instead, just like a real population of individuals, all perform their own unique mental calculus to determine what looks most appealing to them, and in effect gives us the nice distribution of workers that we want. The quantum simulation that we ran at the last CitizenCon was implemented in TypeScript, a relatively slow language that limited us to less than 10,000 quanta. All of that logic has since been rewritten in C#, and a lot of time and effort invested into optimizing the threading and resource locking, which wound up increasing performance by more than 2 orders of magnitude. Stanton is one of the more complex solar systems and will require about 50 to 100,000 quanta in order to achieve the required fidelity, which means we've got a lot of extra headroom without any additional performance tuning to support upcoming solar systems like Pyro. Much like a real economy, quantum produces a tremendous amount of data, and there are countless ways to adjust the simulation. Finding a combination that produces the desired results is difficult, and in order to solve this problem, we created Odin, a plugin for the Python-based JupyterLab environment. Odin is a powerful web-based tool that allows for real-time data interpretation of the game's dynamic and complex economy based on the actions of both players in the live game and quanta. Here, I'm using Odin to simultaneously show all of the graphs related to the economy of aluminum, where it's mined, refined, manufactured, and sold around the Stanton system. It's a bit overwhelming, so I'm going to refine the search by adding the word buying to the Graph Explorer. Before seeing the actual graphs, we can preview which ones our search has identified, which is very useful in more complicated search scenarios. In this case, though, we've already whittled things down to a manageable size, so I'm going to jump to the actual graphs. Everything looks pretty healthy. You can see the cyclical nature of commodity prices, a sign that we're on the right track and getting the economic modulation we want. All of these graphs are updated from the simulation in real time, and we can zoom in on particular time periods of interest, which is invaluable when trying to figure out exactly why the availability of a critical resource dried up or the price of something went through the roof. With such a complex system, it's often difficult to predict what sort of information we might want to inspect, and Odin was therefore designed to be extremely flexible and adaptive. One particularly powerful data analysis tool that we developed allows us to view the flow of goods and services from a high-level perspective. We call it the Laissez graph, and it can dynamically target economic flows and animate transitions so that we can visually see how things change over time. Here I've selected a number of different product nodes, and you can see all of the economic relationships for those items laid out on the graph. The graph allows us to switch between several key flows, like the volume of goods, the flow of UEC, and even the value density of specific routes in the universe. The nodes are ordered by greatest to least economic activity, and changes over time will reorder them. We can thus detect important shifts in the economy simply by observing how the nodes adjust their position. This tool can inspect both real-time and historical data, so we can step back in time and see the progression of factors that caused a problem to develop and what could be done to remedy it. When inspecting a segment of time, you can see elements of the economy phasing in and out, depending upon whether or not they were relevant during that period. Often we'll want to dig into a particular material to investigate how that material flows throughout the economy. With the Laissez graph, we can choose a material like aluminum, and then all of the items that metal is used to construct, which immediately gives us an intuitive view of the relationships between manufacturing recipes and system-wide logistics from a bird's-eye view. Here, it looks like most of the raw aluminum in the economy is being funneled into items that are being sold in shops on Crusader and ArtCorp. After a while, though, the shops at Crusader run short of inventory and stop selling such goods, and all the sales move to Hurston and ArtCorp. As new materials, recipes, and items are added to an increasingly complex universe, and player behaviors shift, we'll frequently run into such problems, and analytical tools like the Laissez graph will be invaluable in helping us to quickly identify such issues and determining what needs to be done to restore balance. Player actions are fed back into Quantum so that it can factor that data into the simulation, and Odin can evaluate that information just as easily as it can that derived from Quanta. It's fully linked into the law system, for example, and can thus generate a heat map showing where players are committing specific crimes. If there's too much PvP in an area that's supposed to be secure, we might add more security, place additional turrets, or increase the penalties levied by the law system.
Okay, I want to stop there for a second, if that's okay, Kelosal. One of the things that I know that Morphologist mentioned when he talked about, when he said on Salty Mike's podcast, and they were talking about PvP, and one of the things that he talked about was hoping that CIG would implement heat maps as a way for people to be able to, like PvPers, for example, to know where to go in the game, right? Because right now they have no way of knowing where populaces are, so by default, they go to like space stations, right? Because they just know that's where people are. But I love the fact that this whole heat map thing that they talk about, even though, you know, they're going to use it in a sense of economic engines as well, but it's also see wherever there are conflicts. I think that's really cool. You know, I mean, from the Eve days, we had this too, but I'm just glad to see that that this is something that they're implementing, you know, in the game.
Right. And he said something about this particular map when he last talked about this. And everybody was asking, I hope they'll implement the types of heat maps. And he goes a little bit further and talks a little bit more when he gets to the virtual part. But I'm definitely encouraged. I just saw Cade, was it Cade? I believe, or somebody was talking about how this looks like new technology or what have you. Ramar was talking about that.
Yeah, Ramar.
And I mean, I just got to stop just right here for a second and just talk about the two types of attributes that he talked about, the proficiencies and the traits. And now he's all over the traits right now,
right? And
using Odin to go ahead and help out with the implementation of how Quanta acts, or at least how Quantum can act throughout the system. I was hoping that he would share some of the components that were within, some of the elements that were within those components. And they didn't do that. They just basically said aluminum. And then they put in, you know, quantum drive and things like that. They put in components, but not the smaller elements that would be used to make that component. I was hoping to see that. But based off of what I see here.
But he infers that they're able to select anything. Because remember, he goes through the whole thing about player, no matter what the items are, they can bring that up. So, you know, you really didn't
I was just hoping that they would give us a little sneak peek as far as what some of those elements were. As something crossed my head, and I just now forgot it just for a second. No. But you know, it was just interesting to go ahead and see that type of gameplay in for as far as how Odin is being implemented along with Quantum.
Yeah. Okay. I saw what you said. Black Intellect, good to see you. I saw what you said. Odin leads to Skynet.
Oh. It's funny how they changed the name to Laze. They call it the Laze thing. It kind of, I'm like, is that a short for laissez faire? A little French term for let's look at a blind eye
it's pretty
for
cool,
what you're
though.
doing economically. I thought it was cool.
It's cool, though. Okay, here we go.
To be clear, Odin's analytical and statistical capabilities will be of extensive benefit to the quantum simulation, too, as they'll allow it to better understand how to adjust various dials and levers to allow for a dynamic universe where things logically ebb and flow and everything functions as part of a larger, more complex machine. Quanta focused on transporting goods, for example, will demand a price premium based upon how much risk they'll be exposed to on their route, and Odin can sort all of the possible paths they might take by risk, fuel consumption, or whatever other metric they wish to consider so that they can decide whether they're interested in the job, and if so, what sort of payment they would require. Here's a bar graph showing where all of these felons are spending their time, and another one showing how they're spending their money. Odin can identify the most popular mining sites, as well as what materials are being extracted.
What'd you say?
I was shocked that the money was being spent in Area 18 if they're felons. I was shocked.
Well, no, because Area 18 definitely has the more black market side of stuff when it comes down to those alleys and all those weird places and stuff to go. Now, how you going to get in there and do it? I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. How you going to get in there unless you're going to get the, I mean, maybe maybe the Mercury Star Runner you got in one of those areas and you somehow, maybe the tourists, that you go ahead and get in those areas that are secure for scanning.
Maybe there's some way to reduce. Maybe there's some way that you reduce your signal when you fly in, and you land on one of those big buildings that happens to be the place where black market stuff is done, and you just don't get caught. I mean, it's so hard to say what they could come up with, but I agree. It is interesting that they decided to have Area 18. Okay.
From those locations. It knows what sort of ships players are flying, how many players are on board, and what sort of ships they're squaring off against. Odin has complete knowledge of the mission system, which allows it to map player positions against the missions they've accepted. In one shot, then, we can get a sense of which missions players find most interesting, so that we can focus on creating more of that type of content, and where those missions are taking them, so that we can understand sections of the solar system that are underutilized. One of the most interesting graphs we've created is this one that measures mission design quality. Each circle represents a mission, and larger circles indicate that more players have done that particular mission. The x-axis details the percentage of players that successfully completed the mission out of all of the players who completed it, and the y-axis denotes the percentage of players that finished the mission even if they failed it. This exposes all sorts of interesting insights to us. Low positions on the graph, for example, indicate that most players are getting a result other than success or failure. They're either abandoning the mission or disconnecting, neither of which is good. Positions on the far left mean that most of the players that undertook that mission failed it. The lower left quadrant signifies missions that are abandoned frequently and fail when they aren't, which likely points to a problem. Missions near the lower right have a high success rate, but are frequently abandoned, possibly indicating that they're too easy or boring. The most interesting missions are in the upper middle. They're frequently played through to the end, but aren't always successful. These are the missions that are both engaging and difficult. We use information like this to tune the simulation, but also to give us basic feedback on what sort of missions players find most appealing and where problems reside. The refining gameplay that was released late last year made use of a couple of new back-end services. The job service is more general purpose and will also be a key component in the implementation of a number of other upcoming features, including everything from cargo loading and unloading to repair, refuel, and restocking services. The refining service provides game servers with the ability to retrieve a refiner's available processing capacity and a price quote for a given quantity of material with the specified speed and quality options. These new services exemplify the way that development nowadays often proceeds, which is to ensure that all of the linkage to and from the data source is properly abstracted from the start, such that once Quantum can provide the necessary data, we can flip a switch to activate it. Previously, when Quanta traveled to a planet or a moon to mine a resource, they picked a random location on the surface. This meant that Quantum wasn't yet capable of generating the spatial fidelity we needed so that we could properly determine exactly where NPCs should and shouldn't be found. The resource service that we completed last year, however, provides Quantum with an API that not only gives it access to this information, but also enables those amounts to be modified so that as players in Quantum mine an area, it will gradually be depleted. To demonstrate, I brought up a planet. Now I'm going to highlight the location of all of the gold ore. Players in Quanta, of course, would not have this information, and to represent that fact, I'm going to place a shadow over everything. You can see a single quant exploration ship approaching the planet from the right. As it travels across the surface, it will unveil the quantity and location of that ore, visually represented by removing the shadow, and then broadcast that information to other Quanta within its organization. It has discovered a huge vein of valuable ore, and Quanta miners have now started arriving en masse to extract it. They're focusing predominantly on those areas where the concentration is known to be highest, although they'll also consider things like the amount of risk in a given area, perhaps caused by a player or NPC organization fighting to control that region. I'm running this at an accelerated rate, and you can see that the amount of ore at that first large site is declining rapidly. The explorer has now discovered a second field of gold ore near the equator, and because the original deposit has now been mined so extensively, what remains is more time-consuming and difficult to extract, and is thus relatively less attractive. The Quanta have figured this out, and most of them have started to focus their attention on the newer site. Taken together, these new features allow Quantum to generate a lot more detailed information, which will in turn result in a better and more realistic gameplay experience. Quantum will know where exactly on the surface of a planet NPCs might be found and what they should be doing. It will understand the value of knowledge and factor its acquisition, sharing, and sale into its calculations, including what any information you eventually attempt to sell would be worth. Quantum has now been pretty thoroughly integrated into our backend architecture, and the service will be built and shipped with all future releases of the game, which took a considerable amount of time and effort given how different some of its tools and technologies were versus what we had already set up and configured. There is still a tremendous amount of work to do on the simulation side, but we are getting close to the point at which portions of its simulated data will be an improvement over the algorithmic logic embedded into various services. We're going to do a bit more testing before we enable it to start injecting that data into the live game, though, and even then we're going to start very small and limit the focus to a few select areas so that we can work out any problems. The first couple of commodities for which Quantum will gain the ability to dictate the price will be fuel and repair materials. We're also going to allow it to control the amount of piracy and possibly transport freighters and security in a few test locations, but keep in mind that until more of the data behind the curtains is exposed, the modulation may at times seem a bit arbitrary. We're going to be more aggressive with service beacons, and we'll soon move most of that responsibility, the type of beacon being offered, the location, the reward, and the difficulty, to Quantum. Our primary focus right now is less on getting a lot of data moving back and forth, and more on getting all of the technological plumbing working properly. In order to properly calculate fuel prices, for example, Quantum needs to have a concept of fuel, what type of ships Quanta are using, and fuel efficiency, none of which it previously had. In order to gauge the demand for repair services, ships in the simulation need a concept of damage, which didn't previously exist. There's often a lot of service work involved in allowing new types of data to flow between Quantum and the game. With iCache now largely complete, we've been able to shift some resources around, and within the last month have now doubled the number of engineers working on the systemic functionality.
Did you hear that, Kelosal?
Yes, it did.
All right, gang, you heard it here. With iCache largely complete. Those are words that we've been waiting for a long time. He didn't say completely complete, but he said largely. And I think the last update we had was that it was beginning. So it's good to know that iCache is starting to come together for us, which is awesome.
It's definitely good to know, because we even heard that from a lot of streamers saying that it's about a year out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. There are plenty of people that said we wouldn't see it till next year, because they said July.
Plenty of people. It
said July, and there were people saying, "Oh no, there's no way it'll probably come." And I understand the pessimism with things being called out, but I think there was a lot on the line. I think a lot of us have talked about the fact that inventory piece, there's a lot in the game that can't move forward until they get that implemented in the game. So I'm sure it's been a high priority for them to get iCache going.
Well, that's definitely nice and assuring to know that it's largely complete. I want to know what their definition of largely is.
Yep. And Parker, we agree on engineering wise. Yeah, we get it. That's why I said that there's still stuff that they have to do. But to know that means that they're getting over the hurdles that were there in the beginning for us, I think is really, really cool.
Right, and it's nice to know that the focus is on the technical aspects. They know they'll get the data, and they know they've been getting the data, but now they're putting the resources together now to finally solidify the foundation of the game. Yep.
Okay, here we go.
As a result, we're now in the early stages of a number of critical new services, including everything from the air traffic control service that's required for server meshing, to the NPC scheduler that will enable dynamic populations, to the virtual AI service that is necessary for the next major feature I'm going to discuss.
Okay, so before we go into virtual AI, I'm just going to pick one thing for me that stuck out with this, and it has to do with, and he's going to kind of touch on this a little bit more in these other sections too, but you know, a lot of times there are things that change in the game, and players often become very frustrated, usually because of the economic loss, or you know, some, like for example, trade, right? You know, trade was back in the day, it was Jump Town, right? People were able to make a lot of good money on Jump Town. Then it kind of shifted from that into doing trade with when mining came in with Laranite, things of that nature. People were able to do these cargo runs and make a lot of money. Then we went into, I can't remember what it was. There was something else that kicked in. It wasn't bounty hunting, but something kicked in that everybody started doing that. And then we went to the box runs, right?
Mining.
And mining, right? And then we did the box runs, right? Then the box runs got cut. And I think that sometimes players forget that there are reasons why those things are hot one day. You know, they're the flavor of the month for one period of time, and then all of a sudden CIG goes in and does some big nerf, right? They change something, but it's a part of their whole testing process of how the players, what we respond to, how we respond to it, where they want us to move our emphasis from, because maybe we've been doing this certain thing for a while, but they need us to start doing something else. So they devalue it, which forces us as players to start doing something else. So when I see him say that this Odin system is monitoring all these things, like when they showed that little heat map with the blobs showing what were we playing successfully, what were the things that people lost interest in, all of that is like so cool to me. That a part of our testing is not just from bugs, you know, and filing out bug reports, but it's also just our general gameplay, that they're using that as a way to start to build how the game will be later. That's the only thing I really want to talk about from that. What did you have, Kelosal?
Well, and in addition to that, is you can kind of see that, you know, as far as where is it in gameplay right now, you can kind of see that even in gameplay. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're seeing notices that are popping up, and they're saying, oh, the price check of this item and the price check of that item and that item and that item. And that's all being dictated now by Quantum.
Yes.
And Odin.
Mm-hmm.
So, before
you go further, tell people, because some people may not have seen the commodities alerts yet. Some people may not. Why don't you tell them what you're talking about?
Yeah, the commodities alert, based off of what we're saying here, the commodities alert, basically, if you pay attention to your screen, just as the same way, and all these things tie into Quantum again, going into the assisting of Quanta. The commodities alert is an alert system that basically allows the system to send out a beacon. It's almost like a little beacon that says, okay, some commodities have changed in price based off of demand, supply and demand. Mm-hmm. Okay, and you'll see an alert that'll come up the top of your screen, just like you would have if you saw an alert from a player, a service beacon, or any types of missions that come up. And you go check in your journal, and when you look in your journal, you'll be able to see the commodities list and the listings of the commodities and which locations they are at in terms of if they are in high demand or if they are in short or in low demand. Mm-hmm. And the prices will change. And once again, this goes right into what he's talking about with Quantum and Odin.
Yep. So guys, make sure, because I saw it today for the first time. I knew about it, but I hadn't seen it. And I was at the convention center, and like you said, Kelosal, I got that notice popped up. My problem was I was looking for it, trying to figure out where it was, and I went to the journal and didn't see it. But when you go to your journal, make sure you scroll down, because it's at the bottom of your journal list. Yeah. And like you said, they give you all the information on gold, whatever it is. Like you said, they relay that information, that the prices have changed on commodities and where and all this other cool stuff. So yeah, it's very cool. Very cool. Okay. Let's jump into the virtual AI. Let's do part 2 here.
Star Citizen's AI architecture is broken up into 3 distinct levels. The high-fidelity characters that you see in the game execute subsumption logic on a server, and this is far and away the most computationally expensive of the 3 types of AI. It's got a similar sense-think act cycle as the other AI, but because you can see the NPCs as they execute their tasks, there's often little to no potential for cheating or simplification. Something as simple as sitting in a chair requires a lot of item searching, animation, raycasting, collision detection, and more. This is a problem because in Star Citizen we're trying to simulate entire solar systems, and we can't afford to execute this kind of expensive logic for tens of thousands of characters that players can't even see. So we do what many games do and temporarily suspend any AI that's not in proximity to a player. This creates another roadblock, though, because you can't effectively simulate an economy when portions of it are constantly being shut down and restarted, and it's the fundamental reason why quantum exists. Merging these two AI extremes, subsumption and quantum, solves our basic problem. NPCs look and act exactly as you'd expect when you can see them, and the universe's economic wheels always remain in motion. There's one major flaw, however, with this solution. The heavyweight subsumption NPCs that you can see and interact with don't execute any AI logic when you're not around, and thus they're severely limited in what they can do and when they can do it. Solving this issue is the responsibility of a middle tier of systemic logic that I call virtual AI. Virtual AI allows virtual NPCs, VNPCs for short, to seamlessly transition back and forth between the fully realized and physical world of subsumption and a far more efficient intangible back-end ether where they retain the ability to interface with elements of the systemic architecture just like a player. This technology is going to unleash a lot of new and exciting gameplay, but it's going...
Okay, you guys forgive me. I'm going to go back a little bit because I can't believe he said that in one breath and it was kind of crazy, so...
There's one major flaw, however, with this solution. The heavyweight subsumption NPCs that you can see and interact with don't execute any AI logic when you're not around, and thus they're severely limited in what they can do and when they can do it. Solving this issue is the responsibility of a middle tier of systemic logic that I call virtual AI. Virtual AI allows virtual NPCs, VNPCs for short, to seamlessly transition back and forth between the fully realized and physical world of subsumption and a far more efficient intangible back-end ether where they retain the ability to interface with elements of the systemic architecture just like a player. This technology is going to unleash a lot of new and exciting gameplay, but it's going to take more than a few sentences.
What'd you say? Because I want people, because I want people to understand where he's going with this.
Yeah.
I mean, this allows, because he said, it's literally said it. He said, subsumption AI is very expensive.
Right.
Okay, it's expensive. So this allows, and so now he's got a new terminology. We call it NPCs, right? we call it NPCs, little computer-based, thingamajigs.
Right.
And now he's saying basically in order for, we got a new thing called a VNPC, a virtual NPC, and these jokers switch back and forth depending on what they do.
Right. So they either work when they're operating in subsumption, which means the physicalized thing, we see them, they're doing an activity, or he says they're in the ethereal, where they're no longer generating that, like you said, that expensiveness in the game, but it's running in the background still. Right. Right.
Because they've done something that requires that makes them almost like an asset now, a mission based. Right.
Right.
It could a good example of that is bounty. I mean, if you paid attention in game, guys, if you're doing bounty hunter missions, how many of you guys have, and you maybe you could put it up in chat, how many of you guys have seen a name pop up and you've accepted a bounty and a name pops up and it says now, or at least last seen. Okay, and he's going to get to that. And he says, last seen in this area. That's what he's talking about. That's what he's talking about with that assumption of that VNPC. So I just wanted to stop you right there before we got into that, Griff.
Yep. No, that's cool. Very cool. Okay, here we go.
To properly explain what I'm talking about. So let's walk through it all in more detail. This is the Stanton solar system. You can see the 4 planets, ArcCorp, Hurston, Microtech, and Crusader. I'm going to zoom into the Crusader planetary area, and you can see its 3 moons, Yela, Daymar, and Selen, and the space station Port Olisar. You can imagine looking at that station, hundreds of NPCs going about their lives. This is how you think of the universe, always in motion, always changing, always real, regardless of whether you're actually looking at it or not. As I mentioned, though, that's an illusion. We can't afford it. When you're not looking, the server deactivates and unloads a lot of unnecessary baggage, but a wide assortment of backend services retain knowledge of everything that really matters and provide an active interface to those systems. NPCs outside of landing zones are treated differently. Quantum accumulates statistical information for where NPCs should reside and what they should be doing from its quanta, which allows us to determine how often you should see a pirate or what a freighter you run into should have in its cargo hold. These areas are called probability volumes, and the important thing to note is that the NPCs they create are ephemeral. They pop into existence for a brief moment so that the area you're viewing looks like what Quantum says it should, and once they're sufficiently far from any players, they're completely and forever destroyed. I'm going to add a player here, which you can see off to the left. As they pass by Daymar, they're in range of a probability volume that, eventually, decides they should encounter a pirate. So, a pirate is created and engages the player, and after a bit, the player decides that they're outmatched and decides to run. Once they're sufficiently far from that NPC, it's destroyed. It doesn't persist in any fashion, and you'll never see them again. The player continues traveling to Port Olisar, and the translucent green wireframe indicates that the area isn't loaded on the server, and thus the subsumption AI isn't active. I'm going to add a VNPC in a moment, but first let's quickly recap what makes them so different. VNPCs always execute some form of AI logic, regardless of whether or not they are in proximity to a player. Virtual AI is extremely lightweight and computationally efficient, stripping out all of the expense related to visuals and unnecessary details, yet retains the full ability to interact with the game in the ways that truly matter. Virtual AI executes within a backend service and can thus easily be scaled and doesn't put any load on the servers. VNPCs can seamlessly transition back and forth from lightweight, back-end-driven AI entities to full-blown, subsumption-driven NPCs, and are thus indistinguishable from an NPC that really did execute expensive subsumption logic all the time.
Which is Quanta.
Lastly, VNPCs gradually build...
Well, yeah, it's Quanta, but again, like you said, he created this new VNPC thing so that people, like you said, it moves between what he calls subsumption, saying that, like you said, the expensive Quanta that's physically out there that you can see versus the one that is virtual. Right. So like you said, and it moves, like you said, it moves between those two as needed. You know, I'm kind of blown away with that whole thing when he talked about the pirate ship, you know, that appeared and then it disappears and then you won't see it anymore, because later he talks about the pirate that shows up and it follows, the game follows it. But I like that because a lot of times people will say, well, how do we play the game and we don't get bored, or like certain things happen? Like you could pass through there and see the pirate. I could come right behind you and it may not happen for me. You know what I mean? So
right,
that there's
absolutely.
not that repeated gameplay. That means that there's no repeated gameplay. I can always go back here if I want to make money. Just fly past Daymar and I always know that pirate is going to show up. That's not going to happen. You know, it's not going to happen. Yeah.
Up their own unique histories as they live out their lives. They evolve. Okay, so back to the example. Once the player gets close enough to Port Olisar, that area is streamed into existence, loaded onto a server, and the NPC is initialized to resume whatever they should be doing at that time of day. Now I'm going to introduce a VNPC pirate near the player, and they're going to immediately attack. After a few moments, the VNPC comes out ahead in this battle, and the player is killed. Because their crime was committed in range of an active comm array, it's recorded in their character history, along with the time and location of the felony.
Okay. This blew me away, gang. The NPCs have their own character history. What'd you think of that, Kelosal?
Well, I mean, but this is the good stuff, because this is what they sat there and said. I mean, this is going to lead to all that other stuff. What they sat there and said, we'll be able to understand and see everybody's going to have a basically history.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and the NPC definitely has one. But look at it, after he blew up that player ship, as soon as he blew up that player ship, that Joker became a part of subsumption. And not just became a part of the VNPC.
Not just that he blew up the ship, but he talked about the fact that because it was detected by the comm array.
Correct.
That kind of blows my mind that the comm array is tracking NPC activity. I get it if it's tracking us, but the fact that that's now recorded as a criminal violation for the NPC, and then, as you know, later on it talks about how his bounty, his reward goes higher and higher.
Right. And this is what I was saying earlier, Griff, because I was saying if everybody pays attention to the top of their screen, you know how it says these are what we call beacons.
Yeah.
Some of them call service beacons.
Yes.
It pops up at the top of your screen saying that such and such needs help.
Yep.
And you could go ahead and select it. This is the effect.
Yes.
Of that probability, what they were saying,
right?
That event, and now we get to see now what he's saying with this, and 115 murder, and this comm array has detected, and as long as that comm array is on, we get to see where that person is if you've accepted the mission.
Right. And there, MVS, good point. You know, so you need that level of tracking for bounty hunting gameplay, and I get it. I guess I'm just kind of used to the old school thing where it was just like a criminal would be randomized with a certain value and a certain skill level. But here, they basically, in their own way, have their own NPC reputation. That how successful that NPC is, their level of reputation increases as well, just like as their bounty will increase. Where I'm used to back in the day where the thing would just generate a bounty for 10,000 and that was it. And no matter how many times you came, tried to kill that person, it stayed at 10,000. He talks about the fact that there's like you said, a tracking that takes place, and that kind of blew my mind when I thought about that for I thought it was enough for players, let alone, like you said, Kelosal, NPCs being tracked at that level. Right.
And it's good to note that they do have a back end server that takes care of this part.
It's totally separate, right?
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, here we go.
An upcoming tracking app will allow you to access information like this if you've registered with the local authorities, so that the digital footprints players and VNPCs leave behind can be tracked. This VNPC's name is Dragon, and since they're now wanted in this jurisdiction, the comm array has affixed a real-time marker to his position. With the only player in this area dead, the server now streams Port Olisar and the comm array out, but as I previously noted, VNPCs aren't destroyed like a regular NPC created from a probability volume, and their logic isn't suspended like an NPC at a landing zone. Instead, VNPCs simply transition from their physicalized state, where authority over their actions is controlled by subsumption logic executing on a server, to their native ethereal state, where their virtual AI executes on the back end. Dragon now begins to exit the area, and the comm array continues to track his position until he passes out of range, at which point the real-time information converts to a last known position report. He's decided that he needs money, and he's a bit risk-averse, so he elects to head all the way out to Yella, where there are quite a few transport freighters carrying valuable ore and little in the way of security. Okay, Dragon has arrived at Yella's asteroid field and has now crossed back into range of another active comm array, so his real-time position is now once again being reported, as indicated by both the character history and the tracking marker. There aren't any
Could you start that, Griff, for a second?
I know.
I mean, so this is good, but Fastcar asked a question about, but the NPCs outnumber us 10-1. We don't know that really, because based off of this system here, the NPCs come and go.
Yeah, right.
NPCs come and go based off of the demand or based off of what's going on. And if they do something, then they become a part of the VPN. Yeah, and if you take care of them, they go. But just like you said, we just saw a clip. That NPC came in, and the player went away. He came into that probability zone. The player went away. The NPC was gone. So we don't know what it is, and that right there, Fastcar, I believe, will take care of the tracking part. Because once again, they said consumption is expensive. If these things stayed in there the whole entire time, they wouldn't be able to maintain that at all. Especially when we start putting other systems like Pyro and everything else in.
And he describes that ethereal rate. He called it their native state, which means that's where all of the functionality about that character is. The subsumption is nothing. If you put it in plain layman's terms, subsumption is when they materialize, right? When they're physically in the game, we can interact with them, whatever the case is. But their native state, or all the stuff that is stored about them, is in that ethereal state. Now, to your point, Colossus,
or they become real or lively now, or immersive, more immersive in that state. Yes.
Right. Now, Fastcar, to your point, the ratio is, I think it's 9-1. I don't know if it's 10-1, but if it's 10-1, 9-1, whatever the case may be, there's still this aspect of things. What I thought was interesting was just something as simple as him leaving where that encounter took place, right? When he leaves Port O and decides to go to Yella, when he goes outside of the comm array detects him as communications lost. And also at that same point, he goes into the ethereal state. And then while it's in while he's still in the ethereal state at this, because his encounter ended, when he approaches Yella, he's still in the ethereal state, but the comms array treats it as if he's still there. It still sees him. We don't, but he's there. So like Colossal said, they're not utilizing resources, but that Dragon is still active in the game, still doing stuff, going to go to the bar, going to sit down and eat until there's an encounter with him, which is, again, pretty mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty simple a little bit in terms of the way he's trying to explain it, because I'm assuming that once those guys become ethereal or, more immersive, it's going to take away the other ones that they don't need. I'm assuming that.
In the subsumption state, yes, they're not existing.
That's what I'm saying.
But the ethereal state always exists. It's always running. Correct. Like he said, 24/7. That's the live universe that's always running. Right. Exactly. Okay. Cool. Here we go.
In this area, and thus none of this is streamed onto a server. Everything you're seeing is a result of a variety of different services communicating with one another. VNPCs trigger probability volumes just like players, and Yella's shows that there's quite a bit of freighter traffic in this area. So Dragon won't have to wait very long before he generates an encounter. There's one. Dragon just caused the creation of a freighter, which itself becomes a VNPC so that it can react to what's happening via its own virtual AI.
Okay, let me. Yeah, I know. Okay, right. Yes, I'm the same point. Okay, so I'm sure you guys heard it, but for those of you who might have been, taking a phone call or something, he says that the VNPC Dragon generated another VNPC. So there are NPC encounters taking place in the game where they're triggering. So it's not just us that triggers it, but the probability volume, by him going into that area where there are plenty of freighters, he sets off an NPC encounter, which is pretty cool. Let's see what Black Angelic says. So the AI sweeping the floors will not remember you being there before, like maybe the shopkeeper there will. That's a good question, Black Intellect. I don't know. When we deal with interactions, No, actually, I would disagree, because they talked about the fact that when we interact with NPCs, and I don't know if it's going to be all NPCs, so maybe that mop guy won't, but they said that people will remember your reputation. They'll remember how you treat them, how you respond to them. They said they may even recognize what you're wearing, clothing, or I remember one instance they talked about your body odor. Whether people or not will want to talk to you or not. But we definitely know reputation. Kelosal did a big thing on reputation not too long ago, how there are people already in the game. If you start doing certain work for, who is it, for Twitch? Who doesn't like Twitch, Kelosal, in the game? Which
Black something. Twitch doesn't like a group called Black Jack, or something. I think it's Black Jack.
Mm-hmm.
And there's two other people that she is not good with. She used to work with them.
Yep, Kate said Black Jack. Yep.
Right, and and they threw her out, or because of her disability.
Right.
And so she's not. So if you do things with Twitch, you're great, and you're going to lose reputation with Blackjack. If you do things with Blackjack and a couple other organizations that Twitch doesn't like, because Blackjack, I believe, does things with assassinations, and Twitch is just rather steal stuff instead of assassinating people, then you're going to go ahead and cause the reputation against Twitch, and more for Blackjack. Yep.
Kate says one of the cool things about the system like this is that it doesn't mention is that this ethereal state of all the NPCs doesn't have to be tracked by the game servers. Yes, that players are on. That's exact good point, Cade. It can be handled by separate servers, which the player game servers then query for the information whenever players are around. Yes, lightening the load on the encounter when the encounter happens. Absolutely, because he mentioned about the fact that the ethereal thing was just on a totally different set of servers. So, yep, good point, Kate.
Right.
Good point. Okay, here we go.
Dragon now engages the freighter. He starts firing on it. He's still within range of an active comm array, and thus this latest crime is added to his character history. He's now wanted for both murder and piracy, and the bounty on him just jumped from 6 to 10,000 UEC. Increasing the size of their rap sheet and the price on their head is one of the simplest forms of VNPC evolution, and over time we'll look to add additional ways for VNPCs to grow and increase their influence, from recruiting followers in an attempt to become a shipping magnate or a crime boss to offering their own missions. The captain of that freighter isn't going to surrender so easily. He's broadcast a combat assist service beacon that players can choose to accept, and he's offered a 3,000 UEC reward for his protection. Unfortunately for him, he's pretty heavily outmatched, and he's quickly destroyed, causing the service beacon to expire before anyone can come to his aid.
Okay, stop right there. So that's what I don't, like I said, I don't know if that's in game or not, but that makes sense now. That makes sense as far as people always say, "Oh, I picked up a mission, but then it just ended." Why?
Ended, yeah. Yep.
So that's interesting. If that thing is destroyed prior to you getting to there to help them out,
then there's no reason to go.
Your services are no longer rendered, buddy.
Yep. Okay, here we go.
Information like this are fed back to Quantum, and in sufficient quantity will cause all sorts of things to change. How much security patrol missions in that area pay, what transports that have to travel through that area will demand as a risk premium, and how much a ship in distress will offer for someone to come to their aid. The freighter's destruction has left some debris and possibly a few items of value, so if a player had already been en route, they might arrive to find the aftermath. Another murder has now been attributed to Dragon, and the bounty on him just once again jumped, this time from 10 to 14,000 UEC. He took a bit of damage from that encounter and is eventually going to need some repairs. A harder working pirate might look to plunder a few more freighters before heading back, but Dragon's personality attributes indicate that once he's got enough cash to cover the basics, he's more interested in drinking and gambling than piracy. So he leaves the area, and once again the real-time location tracking ceases once he's out of range of the comm array. He's heading back to Port Olisar, which is the closest location that has everything he wants. A fence to sell his stolen goods, shops to repair and restock his ship, and a bar where he can spend the remainder of his cash. The comm array near Port Olisar has been disabled, which means that Dragon's position isn't updated upon approach. The area remains devoid of any players, and thus it's still not streamed into memory. Dragon can therefore remain in his ethereal state and avoid a lot of computational expense related to maneuvering his ship, but he still needs to interface with the air traffic control service to request a landing pad and transition from his ship to the station. Services like this are always fully operational and accessible to VNPCs. That landing request is logged to his history though, so while the disabled comm array would make it a bit harder for a bounty hunter to track him, there are lots of other ways by which locational information on a character can be obtained. Dragon needed to refuel and repair his ship, and you can see those actions reflected in his history as he interfaces with the shop service that controls those operations.
Okay. Pardon me for interrupting. Go ahead. You go first.
So I'm encouraged to understand what other ways can we go ahead and communicate if the comm ray is down.
Exactly. He said there will be other ways, right? He said because the ATC records it. The ATC recorded that the person landed, right? Yep.
Right. The ATC records. Okay, that's fine. But once again, the comm array is down. So how am I going to get in communication with the ATC if the comm array is down? And so I'm encouraged to see what type of other components that they have that you can put in your ship, aka the carrier or things like that.
Well, maybe something in your component. Maybe there's something that you hack into at the station where you can find out who has logged into the station.
Right.
That could be another thing too. I mean, they could come up with a whole lot of ways that we as players can find out who's on that station.
So this would allow the pirate to land at a secure station?
Yeah, that's what it says. It said that because the comm array is what fires off his status. So once the ATC lands, let's say you've got the guy's name, but you just don't know where he's at. So let's say you're able to hack into one of those panels at the station that allows you to see who has landed. And now you see that guy's name, then you know he's there. I'm just saying that's one way it could easily be done. Because they said that the ATC is going to track and log. So it's got to have something to do with that log entry that's put in. But I mean, who knows? There may be some other stuff that they could come up with, maybe like you said, something that allows you to scan ships that are based at that station, Yeah.
Hold on tight to your seat, folks. It gets better.
When a VNPC transitions to a landing zone that's streamed in, the virtual AI service that drives their logic temporarily cedes control of the character to the NPC scheduler that specifies who resides at what location. This is the same foundation upon which the dynamic populations feature will be built, except that it will be quantum instead of the virtual AI service dictating the changes in the population. The end result is that if a VNPC is assigned to a landing zone and you're at that location, you can run into them like any other NPC. Dragon is now hanging out in the local bar, which was added to Port Olisar for the purposes of this demo. If you were to walk into the bar at this moment, he'd be physicalized with the rest of the environment and you'd actually see him there.
I just stopped
Dragon eventually.
Okay.
And then we're going to play it. This is amazing to me.
It is.
This is amazing. This dude simply, because he's a quanta, he's now a VNPC to the point to where this dude has the nerve to get on his ship and land and literally have a drink, knowing that he committed a crime and he's got people looking for him. And you can actually go and interact and find him at a bar. Him or her.
But he also knows that the comm array is down.
Right.
Another factor. Because he mentioned the fact. Remember, he said the fact that he knew that the comm array was down. He said that was less stuff that he would have to do. The NPC knew there was less that they would have to do now to get into Port Olisar. So evidently, if the comm array was up, whether that means that he would no longer go there, or whether there'd be something else he would have to do to be able to get in, we don't know. But evidently, the comm array being out had an effect of whether or not he decided to go to Port O, or how easily it was for him to get into Port O. But you're right. It is interesting that he just sit there and he knows that, and he's like, "Hey, nobody knows I'm here." Which is,
it's just amazing now that they're doing this now with NPCs or VNPCs now. Because I did this with a player a couple of months back ago. We were bounty hunting, and we were looking for a guy who basically went over to Levski. And I went and I role played. I was like, "Hey, you have a warrant for you, and I'm here to collect on that warrant. You might as well come with me." He was like, he gave me the middle finger, and I told him, where did he learn that from? He might as well come on with me, and it was great. It was great role play.
Right.
But now to see that with the VNPC is going to be amazing.
Good job. Something that their MVS just said: bribe the bartender. And because people will have reputations, who's not to know that one of the things right now, bartenders only ask you what you want to drink. But what doesn't say that if you were to go to that bartender and you ask if there are any questions, right, and he gives you a tip, there's somebody here you might be looking for. You know what I mean? Who knows? There's all types of ways that you may be able to find out who's actually on the station. Maybe one of the shopkeepers even is able to tell you, It's interesting stuff.
He gets his fill of entertainment, or maybe he just runs out of money. Either way, it's back to work, and he'll be jetting back to Yellow to try and prey on more unprotected cargo ships. So he contacts air traffic control to get clearance to leave the area and departs. The same player that Dragon first encountered and killed is looking to exact some revenge, though, and claim the big bounty on Dragon's head. They've surmised that there might be a pattern to Dragon's movement and think that he might head back out to Yellow. So they position themselves between Port Olisar, where they know that Dragon just left, and Yellow, and activate a quantum interdiction field. Dragon, still in his lightweight ethereal form, initiates a quantum jump from Port Olisar to Yela and, just like a player, routes that movement through the probability volume service that is responsible for interdictions. Once he gets within range of the player's interdiction bubble, his jump is interrupted and he transitions from executing virtual AI on the back end to a full-blown subsumption-driven AI executing logic on a server so that the two of them can battle it out. If the player once again gets the worst of it, they might decide to change up their tactics a bit and wait to see if Dragon soon returns to Port Olisar, where they could try to sneak up on him on foot.
Okay, let's stop there for a second. By the way, guys, this is the reason why you zig and zag when you quantum jump. You don't run in straight lines. So, Kelosal, what do you think about this whole thing that we've seen so far with this whole thing with what was it, AI?
I mean, I'm really excited about the virtual AI. I'm glad he took the time to sit down to talk to us about the VNPC compared to the NPC. I'm glad he sat down to explain to us about how this was, because we had questions even asked, how are they going to manage this? This is almost close to impossible. And he clearly told us that they'll be able to manage this using back-end servers to generate a VNPC. And then from time to time, these things switch from being subsumptive to being
ethereal.
Ethereal. I love everything that they have said here. It's interesting how they put this out in midweek, or not midweek, early in the week like this. But when more people get to chew, people are going to be chewing on this for the next week.
Yeah.
This is good. This is good stuff. This is good stuff.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think it was Cade made a remark earlier. He said the reason why he made that explanation that he made, he says, because there have been a lot of people, as you just mentioned, Kelosal, who've been concerned about when they implement this virtual NPC piece into the game, how will it affect game performance? And he was just saying that this shows you how they're working around that by having these on different servers. They won't be impacting the servers that we're playing on in the game, which is cool, which is very, very cool. Okay. Hey, Admiral, good to see you. And then Black Intellect says, are they going to factor in the AI flies after having drinks? Which is something they didn't think about, whether he gets the DUI, the flying under the influence, FUI for flying under the influence, right? Okay, let's take a look at the dynamic events. This is something that we kind of already got a taste of with the Xeno. Let's take a look at that.
The ultimate objective for Star Citizen has always been a dynamic and evolving universe. Historically, however, our mission content has always been static. We've had no ability to modify it after we pushed a version out the door. Missions have also been confined to a single server, each of which was thus its own little island, cut off and oblivious to whatever was happening elsewhere. Environmental data that applies to all of the servers, what items the shop offers for sale, how many freighters or pirates are in a given region of space, or what missions are available at a landing zone, couldn't be altered by the instance mission logic that executes on individual servers, since we didn't yet have a means of coordinating those efforts. The end result has been a universe that often feels static and fails to offer sufficient variety. Dynamic events are a special type of mission intended to help remedy this problem. They are modular chunks of configurable content that might involve anything from throwing a simple wrench into the wheels of the systemic economy, to a prison break that stresses the law system, to a full-blown invasion of a solar system. Dynamic events are global in nature. They affect the entire array of servers. They do this via extensions to the mission language that allow them to declare what logic runs in parallel on every server and what executes on the back end, while at the same time gaining the ability to query and modify a lot of global data. This allows us to keep the critical elements of these scenarios synchronized across all of the servers while retaining the flexibility for every server to have its own unique state. Conceptually, the servers control the battle and the back end manages the war. The Xeno Threat mission that we released in the first quarter was a dynamic event. It was triggered manually, although Quantum will eventually gain the ability to automatically activate these scenarios when conditions warrant. If, for example, the amount of piracy in an area gets out of control, Quantum might search through the mission library to find a dynamic event compatible with an elevated amount of piracy, and then customize and instantiate that scenario so that a lot of handcrafted content, unique character dialogue, challenges, rewards, can be blended into the universe simulation. We're aiming for the best of both worlds then, a systemic universe that provides a logically consistent background environment with the ability to overlay content and storylines that writers, designers, and many others have spent a lot of time creating. This is Quasar, a new tool that lets us manage dynamic events in the live game. It's linked to the same star map as Quantum and has access to much of the same information. I'm looking through the library of available events, and as I select each one, you can see the input parameters that can be used to customize that particular scenario. We've got quite a few of these at different stages of development, with Fleet Week, Ninetales, and Infiltrator being the next few in the pipeline. I'm going to walk you through a simple dynamic event called Quasar Demo that will show off a few of the systemic hooks we've...
Okay, I got to go back just a little bit. He named 3 dynamic events: Fleet Week, Ninetales, and Infiltrator. We hadn't heard anything about Infiltrator. Had you, Kelosal? I hadn't heard anything
I have not.
Okay.
I have not.
All right, just want to make sure we make note of that.
Yeah, I got it written down. I'm making note of it.
Okay.
Can be used to customize that particular scenario. We've got quite a few of these at different stages of development, with Fleet Week, Ninetales, and Infiltrator being the next few in the pipeline. I'm going to walk you through a simple dynamic event called Quasar Demo that will show off a few of the systemic hooks we've linked into the mission system, but first I need to specify the inputs. The first thing that it requires is a location, and I'm going to select Port Olisar by simply clicking on the star map. The next couple of variables require a ship type. I'm going to specify Idris for the Defender input and Cutlass Black for attackers. If Quantum were to programmatically trigger an event like this, it'd fill in variables like these with something that made contextual sense. So, for example, it'd be looking at what sort of ships were in the area where the event would be activated to determine what it could consider. The next variable relates to difficulty, which in this particular case has simply been configured to dictate the speed at which enemies will appear. The last input, enemies remaining, indicates how many enemies must be destroyed in aggregate across all of the servers in order for the war phase to be completed and the victory phase to be activated. I'm going to set this to 10. With everything configured, I can now activate the event. Quasar communicates this request to the dynamic mission service, which then initializes the backend logic, allocates the global variables, sets up the phase conditionals, informs all of the servers to start any instance logic the event might contain, and quite a bit more. I'm now going to flip over to Quasar's Active tab so that we can check the event's real-time data. You can see that there's currently just a single event active, but we could just as easily activate multiple and give each of them a different set of inputs. Dynamic events organize changes to backend data in coordinated chunks of logic called phases, and the phases that have been created for this event can be seen at the top right. They're all inactive now, hence the red color, and will turn green if their conditional evaluates to true, at which point their embedded logic would execute. The event's global variables are shown below that, and it's in this area that you can see the enemy's remaining variable for which we previously specified an input value of 10. Lower still are the functions for this event that have been marked external and which allow us to manually or programmatically call functions to customize aspects of the event after it's already been launched. The list of items that a shop offers to buy or sell has always been static. Phases, though, can include shop modifiers, which open the door to dynamically changing all sorts of shop-related information. To test this, I'm going to bring up a client window so that we can see what Port Olisar's admin office is currently buying. I've minimized the inventory for this test, so I'm only expecting to see a couple of items. That's the full list right there, just hydrogen and processed food. The modify shop phase has been set up to activate when the backend variable called current phase has a value of 1, so I'm going to set it to that. The phase just turned green, meaning that it's enabled, and any changes to the backend data have now been applied. It applied a shop modifier to crank up the demand for food at Port Olisar, so let's see what's happening to the price. It was stable for a long time with just some minor fluctuations. Now, though, it's gone through the roof, the direct result of all of that increased demand. So players and Quanta would be incentivized by higher prices to help correct this imbalance in the economy. This phase also had a shop modifier add a new item for purchase, and you can see that Quantum already knows about it. I'm going to flip back to the client, though, so that we can verify that this really did affect the inventory within the game. Sure enough, the shop is now looking to purchase a new item, medical supplies. Manual control over the economy like this is not intended to be a substitute for Quantum's systemically derived adjustments, but simply gives us the ability to occasionally nudge the system in a particular direction to add some interest or layer a compatible story onto the background environment or an existing trend. Quantum will then take these influences, factor them into the simulation, and output how everything changes in response so that all of the rough edges are smoothed. While we're looking at prices, I want to show off another new feature that will go out the door within the next few months. As designers gain the ability to write mission logic that can properly affect systemic change, temporary price imbalances will become more common, and we wanted to have a way for the system to actively reach out and inform you rather than relying upon you constantly having to check in on an area to discover that there's an opportunity. If we wait just a bit longer, the admin office is going to reach a point where it's so desperate for food that it's going to start reaching out, looking for ways to obtain more supply. It will do this by sending a message that will be recorded in a special area of your journal reserved for price alerts, which is basically a precursor to being able to create and post missions. You can see the message there indicating that the Port Olisar admin office needs food and what they're willing to pay for it. This feature gives designers the ability to dictate at a systemic level how shops will respond to inventory gluts and shortages, and this functionality will soon be extended to things other than commodities. An area suffering from too much piracy, for example, might offer to pay mercenaries to come to their aid. This is fundamentally different than the brute force tactics we currently rely upon to create missions and dictate when they're available, and it's far more flexible and powerful. What you're really seeing here are the first signs of the dynamic mission system starting to flicker to life, and once it hits full stride, it's going to transform the gameplay experience. Next, let's take a look at how dynamic events allow encounter probabilities and interdiction frequencies to be adjusted.
Okay, I want to stop there just for a second. I think it's important, and again, I don't want to speak like as if people don't know this, but maybe it's because I'm watching this for the second time and it's just making certain things pop in my head, that much of what we have in the game that quite often people will get frustrated with or say it's broken or it's not working right, that the dynamic system that he's talking about, we're nowhere near. We haven't had anything like that. Things have either been done manually or they just put something in place like a placeholder, right, in some form. It's just that there's some form of activity. But as far as things being regulated or prices changing, things of that nature, if it is done, it's only been done on a manual level. And it's not being done in a way that's reflective of what's going on in the verse or in the system that you're in. So I thought that was kind of a reminder, because sometimes, you know, people get a little frustrated with the way trade is or why certain things are the way they are. If they are changing, it's just because they're doing it just to kind of give us a little bit of variety, but it's not being truly impacted by, you know, the way the verse is operating. Is that making sense, Kelosal?
Well, it is. I mean, I think it's slightly being done. If people pay attention, they can see the changes. There are new commodities that are popping in.
I'm talking about previously. Yeah. I'm talking about previously before these new systems.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
You're right. Now it is creeping in. Yeah. In fact, you kind of touched on something that I didn't think about a couple weeks ago when when Invictus started and we were talking about the fact that you mentioned this, and I think Kate or someone just mentioned it in the chat about how the monitors have come to life now, right? That the monitors are broadcasting information. They're broadcasting Invictus information right now.
Right, and it started with Xenothreat.
Right, with Xenothreat, right. So now we'll start seeing other things. Our Moby Glass is now telling us stuff, you know, maybe stations are. And I love the fact that the station was the one that said, hey, we're in need of such and such, which is kind of cool, you know. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Probability volume modifiers.
This is the probability volume around Port Olisar. You can see that piracy, the red curve, and security, the blue, are inversely related. All things being equal, if you increase the amount of security, you'll get less piracy and vice versa. Security tends to congregate closer to the landing facilities and dissipate as you get farther out, and thus piracy tends to gradually increase with distance. The likelihood of an encounter is represented by the height of the curve at that distance. Notice that the chances of running into a freighter, the green curve, is pretty much constant because once a ship has decided to make the journey to or from Port Olisar, it's committed. They've already decided whether or not the risk is worth the reward of traveling the full route. I'm now going to activate the lockdown phase of this event, which is going to crank up the amount of piracy in the selected area and overwhelm security. The red curve, piracy, now has a much larger average height, equating to an increased encounter probability, and because pirates now greatly outnumber security, the curve pushes in much closer to the landing zone. The criminals are emboldened because there's no longer sufficient security to deter them. The blue curve, security, looks identical, although Quantum will, over time, start adjusting the economic levers to gradually increase the amount of security to combat the threat by offering greater rewards. Increased piracy has had an immediate impact, though, on freighter traffic, which has dropped precipitously. This means that the local economy will start to seize up. They won't be able to import food, medicine, fuel, or whatever else they need, and they won't be able to export whatever goods and services they produce. All of these knock-on effects are only possible because designers will now be able to nudge the economic gears in proper systemic fashion. Let's test one of these knock-on effects. Now that we've adjusted the encounter probabilities, let's see what that does to quantum travel in the area. I'm going to once again bring up a game client, this time so that we can watch an Avenger Titan jumping to Port Olisar. This is a short jump, and the chances of interdiction would typically be very slim. Now that we've injected a much larger pirate presence around that location, however, that's no longer the case. We got ejected from our jump as soon as we got within range of those elevated pirate probabilities, which means that getting to Port Olisar just got a lot more difficult and time-consuming, and will remain that way until the threat is addressed. We're now to the point where we can allow programmatic modification of these data structures, and Quantum will soon start adjusting these automatically so that all sorts of things within the universe start to ebb and flow. What all of this really means is that, even when you know that you can buy medical supplies dirt cheap at one location and sell them for a hefty profit at another, we can finally start to adjust some of the systemic elements to justify the disparity. In short, if you wanted to take advantage of Port Olisar's elevated prices right now, you'd have to fly the last mile at conventional speeds, and we'll probably see quite a bit of combat. That's going to drive up how long it takes you to make the run. You're probably going to burn quite a bit more ammo and require more repairs than would otherwise be the case, and you might want to think about recruiting some armed escorts to help you through the dangerous areas. Once the risk abates, once players in Quanta have dispatched enough of the pirates so that travel within this area returns to normal, you'll be able to much more easily deliver medical supplies to Port Olisar, but of course that increase in supply will quickly shrink the price differential. Now let's take a look at how each server can host part of a larger event while the things that really matter can remain synchronized. I'm going to enable the war phase by calling the start war function. That's going to create some staged battles involving the ship types we selected earlier around Port Olisar, the area that we previously selected. I brought up a couple of different client windows, each of which represents a different server. As each cutlass is destroyed on either server, the shared variable called enemies remaining is decremented. Once that variable reaches 0, the war phase will automatically terminate and the victory phase will be activated. That's it. The counter just hit 0 and you can see the change in the active phases over in Quasar. That last phase, Victory, kicked off some fireworks around Port Olisar, and just like any other phase change, that will automatically be synchronized across all of the servers. Just to make sure that things are back to normal, I'm going to check Port Olisar's admin office and see what's happening with the inventory and prices. They're no longer looking to purchase medical supplies, and with the pirate threat eliminated, players in Quanta can once again quickly and safely reach Port Olisar. As a result, the cost of food has started to fall off a cliff and will soon return to something close to its pre-crisis levels.
Okay.
Well.
We both had to chuckle with the fireworks display, right? Which is pretty cool. Pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, pretty straightforward stuff. What do you think, Kelosal?
I'm going to have to look at that again because, I mean, and it's not for the fireworks, folks. I'm definitely going to have to look at it again because I want to understand this probability volume modifiers a lot more. Like I said, I got a part 3, but it's encouraging to see how, once again, how all this intertwines with and affecting quantum. That would also call the assumption and of the VPN to come in, and of course a fleet to come in and go ahead and try to handle that situation. Interesting.
It is.
More research to do. Like I said, a lot of chewing to do this week.
Yeah. The whole idea of a game that's playing itself regardless of what the players are doing and doing it in an impactful way. You know, it's one thing if scenarios are taking place, but they're not affecting anything. But like you said, the fact that we saw when piracy increased, transports reduced because of that, you know, security eventually went up because of bounties and the policing, then the war breaks out, right, against the pirates and whoever's fighting against them. And that had nothing to do with players. You know what I mean? In fact, it was about players had stopped pretty much dealing with it because of the risk of transporting something. So it's amazing to think that, yeah, if players get involved, I remember Tony saying this, if a beacon goes out and players respond to it, great. But if that beacon goes out, an NPC may respond to it, right? Instead, that's the way the game will keep moving regardless to what we do. So the universe basically is alive, it's living,
right?
You know, and it's not contingent upon us having to generate it and make it move. Because we could be playing the game one day, come in and think, oh, I'll come back tomorrow, things are the same. No, the world has changed. It is not necessarily because of us. It's because of the way the world is living, and we come back the next day and things are different. Which I mean,
can you imagine when they actually have threats such as the Vandal come into certain areas?
Yeah, you come back the next day and the world has changed dramatically. Yeah,
I mean, unbelievable. Yeah. There's a possibility a system could be taken over.
Yeah, and the system you're in, right? When you woke up in your bed, right? Okay, let's see what his conclusion is.
I've covered a lot of ground today. Quantum has matured considerably since you last saw it. The performance issues have been resolved, it's been made compatible with our backend infrastructure, and it's now communicating with numerous gameplay services. Lots of new analytical tools and functionality have been added, and increased fidelity in areas like quanta attributes and the spatial positioning of resources have allowed us to improve the accuracy of its output. We're now in early stage testing to allow Quantum to start pushing the first few bits of simulated data out the door and start impacting the game, and we expect to go live with these efforts later this year. The first stones in the Virtual AI Foundation were laid long ago, but it's only been within the past couple of months, as engineering resources rolled off of some other major initiatives, that the implementation effort has really started to take off. This technology will allow VMPCs the freedom to operate and evolve independently of player actions and open up all sorts of new gameplay possibilities. Bounty Hunter V2 will be the first feature to exploit Virtual AI, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg insofar as what we eventually plan to do with it. Some of the Virtual AI Tech Foundation will beget other important features, like the ability to dynamically adjust the size and composition of the populations at landing zones. Dynamic events are the culmination of several major technological components coming together, from the Dynamic Mission Service to Quasar, and are already a reality. We shipped the first one, Xenothreat, in the first quarter, and have a number of others at various stages of development for release later this year and next. Many of these initial releases will serve as testing boards for new features, from shop and probability volume modifiers to spawn closets and the dynamic generation of nav meshes. Dynamic events give us the ability to modify the universe in dramatic or subtle fashion whenever we want, and to seamlessly blend those changes into the quantum simulation so that everything looks and feels natural. All of this will ultimately mean a more interesting, realistic, and exciting universe for you to explore and experience. I hope that this presentation has given you a good sense of what we've been doing over the past year and what those efforts will mean for the game in the coming one. Until next time.
Okay. Oops, sorry, guys. It's the wrong screen there.
Well, Tony,
boy,
it's giving us another pill to chew on.
Yeah, I mean, this
Tony Zurovec. Darn you, Tony Zurovec.
This is my second watch of it, all the way through, and it definitely sunk in a little bit better. I think if I give myself one more third one, I will feel like, yeah, everything I heard is right. Kelosal, for you, what was the one thing? If there was one thing out of everything they talked about, what's the one that really got you fired up?
All right, so let me go through my notes, because I got notes here, folks. So I got to go through my notes because, I've been waiting on this for a long time, and I've been talking about quanta and quantum. I've been trying to sneak it in every show that I've been on. I definitely love the somebody's coming in with a whole bunch of noise.
Yeah, that's Pops and Fist. They're dropping in with us to give us their thoughts. So
give us that. It's fine. I think the thing that I'm definitely excited about is probably more of, like I said, I'm an economist, and I'm all about the economy and trade. So I'm definitely excited about quantum, but I'm excited about how quanta comes in and with the virtual AI.
Okay.
Part 2. Okay. I'm excited more for part 2 than I am with I love the dynamic events, don't get me wrong, but I was never one to go into ESO or World of Warcraft and be like, oh, the world event's happening. I'd be like, okay, you can have at it. You go for it. I would leave it alone. I would just sit there and watch it on the backside. But I always want to at least see how the world operated around me. So part 2, virtual AI, and how quanta can be used. I'm definitely excited about that.
Okay, very cool. Okay. We've got Fist to Face and Pops in Space that have dropped in with us. How you guys doing?
Okay.
Good. Let's see. I'll go to Pops. Since Pops beat you down here, Fist, I'll go to Dad first today. Yeah, Pops.
Boys, how you doing, guys? Good to see you.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I know you had some time to suck all this in. Pops, what about you? If there was something out of the Tony Z presentation, what's the one thing that really stuck with you that you liked?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Kelosal. Absolutely agree with Kelosal. The other part is great, but I think the AI is really a game changer for me. It's but they are working hard.
Yeah.
They're working really, really hard.
Yeah.
And there's things behind the scenes that we don't see that they are doing. And I'm really excited to see that.
Yeah.
I've never heard of anything like that before, but that's great.
Okay, cool. This same question to you. What's the one thing that he had those 3 sections he talked about right at the beginning and talking about the quantum, then you got into the virtual NPCs, and then of course at the end he talked about the dynamic events. Which one is the one that really hit you good?
I'm gonna have to go with the dynamic events.
Okay.
To me, I like because it kind of it brings life to the universe. It brings life to the game, because if you have something where it's just, okay, get a mission, go do this, get the payout, and that's it. Whereas if you're over in somewhere like you said, you're doing something and you're mining in an area, and that you're pulling resources. And one of the things I wanted to go back to is to kind of go to my point. When I saw the first part of the video and he showed the map, there were some stations on there. I don't know if people noticed, but there were some stations that said, what was it? Nova Riders, Low Riders stations. And I noticed that and I said, wait a second. Oh, okay. So these are like, maybe I'm assuming pirate stations in Staten. So to go back to my point was that, let's say you're near one of those stations, or between ArcCorp and one of that station, and you're pulling resources, and the low riders may say, hey, wait a minute, they over there doing something. I need to go get that. That dynamic event that keeps you on your toes, that makes you think, okay, all right, you know what? This is just not, okay, I'm just mining and everything is cool. You know what I mean? It's a living, breathing universe.
Yep. No, I think one of the things that Kelosal actually helped me out with this when we were playing the game was he reminded me to check your journal. Right. Because in the early days of the journal, there was just kind of like the only thing that was in there was the insurance claim job that you did over at Korea, right? Or not Korea, at what's the name of the place? The Kovalex, right? That was the only thing that used to be in that thing. But then they started putting in, when the law system came in, they started putting in the rules, right? And when you go into certain jurisdictions, the laws are not the same. There are certain laws that are applicable here at Hurston, but in ArcCorp, they're a little different. And so when I say he's kind of driven me to pay attention to that now, is that type of information is now going to be even more important, where you're going to have to do, I think we were talking Sunday's show about Elite and Star Citizen, we were talking about how Elite or Star Citizen is something where you're going to have to plan. You're going to have to do your research before going into an area, right? Before carrying a certain type of cargo, or like you said, maybe the particular system that you heard, you might have overheard some people talking about, yeah, I made a lot of money at this moon over in the such and such system. But if you don't do your research, you may not find out that happens to be the low riders' main place where they're doing stuff, right? And like you said, you go into that area, not, you're thinking, oh man, nobody knows about this. Oh yeah, there's somebody that knows about it. It's the low riders. And you set off a whole bunch of a dynamic event or something takes place if you haven't done your homework. So yeah, I love that idea as well.
Yes.
For me, I'd say the part one for me, the Quanta. We saw a bit of it, like he said, in 2019 at the convention. He went into it in greater detail. I love the fact that they talked about how at that time it could only process 10,000 operations, and now they've increased it up to 100,000. And just the fact of because I've always wondered, when somebody tells you there's a 9-to-1 ratio NPC to player, and when they talked about these people will have jobs, I always remember Chris talking about they'll have jobs, they'll go to work, they'll go to sleep, they have to eat. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, really? You know, are we just talking about just these NPCs that are just doing animations? But he was sounding like he said, no, this is what they need to do. If you don't feed your NPCs, they may not work for you, right? Or if you don't pay them. Right. And I'm saying, well, how are you doing that with NPC? I mean, I'm thinking this is just, you know, some type of animations to make stuff look real. But no, this actually has an impact. Reputation having an impact. Will someone talk to you if you don't treat them right, or if you say the wrong thing to them, right? So this is kind of giving us a kind of, like you said, that glimpse into the level that they want to be able to take quantum, the AI, the dynamic events. And like you said, Pops, this also shows that since 2019, they've been working hard. You know, the tools that they brought up for us, showing us, like this one that's on the screen right now, that Kelosal was talking about earlier, that allows them to be able to see certain things. When they said that they can pay attention to what ship you're on, how many people are on it, you know, what you got, all that information is available to them. It's amazing to me. You know, I'm not big on game developing, but I'm sure that, as someone mentioned earlier, there are other games that have similar elements of this. But it seems like, as always with Chris Roberts, he's taking it to the next level, you know, to me.
And as well, Griff, it also goes to what our friend Nihilus has always been saying. It's one thing that I've been trying to listen to Nihilus about, other than his hellacious rant on Origin, has been logistics. Yeah. This is going to force logistics into play, depending on how much they crank up the volume. Okay, so now you're going to actually have to get in logistics involved and actually plan it out. And if you really see the cost benefit of going into Port Olisar with all those pirates over there, and you're saying this item may get us a lot of bang for our buck, but we need to go ahead and plan for this, because right now nobody's delivering because they got a tight hold on this. Is it worth it? Yeah. And if it is, what type of people can we get for escort and things like that and so forth? I mean, I'm looking for the next phase of salvaging. I'm looking for the next phase of, it's like they said they're gonna work on fuel. They said they're gonna do fuel first, and a couple of things that I wrote down, but I put it away just a second. So this logistics is starting to come into gameplay now. Yeah, no, you're right. And for those of you we just saw the screen a second ago about the heat maps, those of you lovers of salvage, get ready. Get ready. Because when you start seeing those conflict zones and stuff, that's when you start telling your folks, hey, y'all, I think we got it's time to play Sanford and Son. Go out here and get some of this stuff up. You know what I mean? So those heat maps are just not for the PvP players. You know what I mean? It's not just for the PvP players. Those of us who are on the industrial side of things will be paying attention to where those heat maps light up, and we'll be sitting in the bar watching the screen, you know. Oh, yeah. You certainly... I'll be on my Banu Merchantman looking in my conference room.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pops.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to say, I think this is okay. If we you play other MMOs, the NPCs in other MMOs are mission givers. You go to them, they send you out, go pick me some flowers, come back with 10 flowers, and I'll give you X, Y, Z, whatever it may be. Yeah. And then you have been in MMOs where you have large orgs that control the whole game. They control the market. Because they sell things, they buy everything up and they sell everything. Where the game is controlled can be controlled by a group of people. This one cannot be done. It's going to be controlled by the AI. And so we can't come in and complain and say, oh, XYZ org they're cornering the market on gold and nobody can do anything about it. This is all going to be NPC based. And to me, I love it, because no org can come in and control the game. It's not going to be a Zerg fest. Yeah. Well, at a 9-to-1 ratio, it's going to be. I mean, we will impact the economy, right? I mean, we will have an impact on it, but we won't influence it to such a degree that we're dominating it. Exactly.
Unless and maybe, I don't know, maybe if you're in a situation where you got that orc that's just running 24/7 on a particular thing, and that's all they do, maybe you could impact it at that level then. But the reality is that as the universe gets bigger, right, that means there's greater opportunity. And that's the other factor. Right now with the one system we have, and there's a lot of room in that one system, but multiply what we have right now by 10, right? And then you start talking about a whole nother level of space. And of course, as the player counts go up, you get into the thousands of people that are playing, it's still a lot of real estate. And someone asked the question earlier, I don't remember who it was in chat, so whoever you were, I remember your question from a while back. They said, how often will these areas refresh? On that example of when they talked about gold being the one, matter of fact, the one that I think Tony's got on the screen right now. In fact, I just happened to mention that. He talks about the fact that there's these gold deposits. The miners start coming there. They start to become depleted. What we don't know is how long will it take for those things to replenish. I'm hoping that they don't replenish. What I'm hoping is that there's so much real estate that new areas are found on that moon. In other words, I don't want us to think that if we come back to that space 3 months later, there's gold there. It may not be there. There'll be gold on the moon, but it'll just be someplace else. In other words, it'll be like as if it was discovered later, like more was discovered, more than the fact that this one location is where I always know. Just like when I was talking about earlier about knowing that I'm always going to run into this one pirate encounter in this particular area. No, it should change, because that variableness keeps people from knowing, all you got to do is go here. Go to this particular mine.
Exactly.
And then you just camp. And you just camp. Exactly.
Okay, I'm good. Okay. I'm sorry. I want to ask you, Griff, a question. I know it's kind of in line with what's going on in the stream, where it talks about you find the goal and you're sending the thing. Do you think, since you mentioned depleting resources, do you think that they will ever allow us to dig? I know we have caves now.
Yeah.
Will it really
for mining? For mining? Yeah, they well, think of it this way, Pops. You know how right now they've at certain hubs, right? Certain mining locations, you've got the machinery there, right? That's supposedly, mining ore from wherever, from above the surface. Whether they'll allow us to underground dig or something, I don't know. Yeah. But I do know that right now there are entities or props in the game. I don't know if you guys ever played Star Wars Galaxies, we had something very similar. When you wanted to go mining, you would drop these big units on the surface of the ground, and they would mine and mine. You go and pull the resources until they deplete it, and when they deplete it, you pick them up and you go to another location. So I don't know if it's necessary to physically mine like that, because in the future, what they did was they dropped these machines on top of the ground. They extract it until they finally deplete it, and when they deplete it, you pick them up and you move them to a new location. So they could easily do that. Whether they'll get into a hole like the voxel base, where you're literally digging out ground and stuff. Could be, in the future, who knows? But right now, I know it'd be easier just to find a thing, drop a unit on it, and say here, and you just got to protect that area. That's where your base is or whatever temporarily.
Now, to go back to what you were saying, though, Griff, I would like to see this though. Like what you said, you don't want to see that particular spot become replenished. And I agree, because then it becomes, like you said, a spawn camping spot for people. But what I would like to see is, hopefully, maybe this is probably already there, dynamic, natural events that may happen. Earthquakes, because earthquakes form mountains, earthquakes form waterfalls. And if you ever watch Gold Rush, waterfalls deposit gold, right? So because that's where a lot of the miners, they go to, if there's a gold deposit, they'll look for that, right?
Or some form of seismic, some type of seismic activity may expose
seismic
something.
Activity, exactly. Something natural event within. That's what I'm
here's
saying.
The deal, right? That could be, but I'll make it easier than that, and that's why I gave my first example. Remember, he showed that ship that came in. We don't know what that ship did, whether it's scanned or whatever, but somewhere or other, it detected that there was a mineral deposit there, right? But you also know how big those moons and planets are. Exactly. How long would it take you to scan all of the square kilometers of any of those moons or planets? So over time, my issue is, let's talk 5 years down the line, right? if we've been depleting a certain moon, there's going to come a point where that moon is almost empty of its resources. Right? We've stripped it, what they call stripping it, right? My question is, will CIG decide to at some point replenish that, or will they remain and leave it stripped? The center of the universe, basically you start at the center of the universe and work your way out, right? Now, for new players, will that become a difficulty? Because if the safer inner system areas are where all the resources are and then they become stripped, that forces them to have to go out into the deeper areas of space. Now, they may find some other ways to work around that. But again, I keep mentioning this. I think we forget how much real estate there's going to be in this game. It's not that there's just 100 systems. Let me not use that 100 system thing, because that's almost too imaginable sometimes. Let's say there are 10 systems, but those 10 systems have anywhere from 2 to 5 planetary bodies in them, such as planets, right? Each of those 2 planets have moons. How much real estate are we talking about? You know what I mean? That's a lot of real estate. That's a lot of real estate just within 10 systems. Some of them will have resources, will be resource rich. Some of them may not have resources. Some of them have certain resources exclusively over other systems, Right. So I'm just saying, when you start talking about 10, 20, 30, 40 of these systems with, systems, then you've got planets, then you've got moons, then you've got asteroid belts. Oh my God. There's so much real estate that's going to be in this game. You ain't got to worry about depleting too much stuff, unless you're talking about over a long period of time.
But then I mean, obviously you know more than I do, but then like you said, you're talking about undiscovered areas.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
So, and who knows what that, because like you said, CIG wants to throw those Easter eggs out there for you to go find or whatever, so you've got to figure out, you might come across that planet that's been undiscovered, like you say in in Elite Dangerous, where if you discover a moon or something like that, that moon, I believe Dark Knight was explaining to me, that moon now becomes discovered by you and you get written into the lore of the game.
Chris Roberts said the same thing in this game.
Right, and that was what I think. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I apologize. That's Kimmy explained that to me.
Yep.
That was right. So I mean,
and dear, you're right. Yeah, I trust me. I wasn't suggesting that there'd be any voxel based stuff. I was just using it as an example because when people do digging, they think about like a voxel based game. But yeah, I'm not too thinking about the digging too much. And I think Kate said, someone mentioned about whether or not they would do passive mining. I don't know if they would or wouldn't. I was just mentioning that whatever you're doing they could use something just to extract, but God only knows what they're going to do. Vela Kate, thank you so much for the follow. You're our first follower tonight. We appreciate it. There's a lot of stuff, guys. I mean, the great thing, like Kelosal said earlier. Go ahead, Kelosal.
No, I'm just sorry. I'm Admiral Kusanagi talking about, I love the sound of a Kusanagi system. You're going to have to go to Elite Dangerous. That one's there.
But you know what? That is a cool name, Admiral. I will give you that, the Kusanagi system.
He's going to have to go to Elite Dangerous, get in the ship, and find a system. It'll be called the Kusanagi system.
That is a good name. It does sound like a name that would be out there, right? The Kusanagi system. I like that.
That's awesome.
Or the Colossal Belt.
Yeah, the Colossal Belt. There you go.
I got 3 systems named after me, but I'm already on top of that. I got 3 systems.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sorry, Griff.
No, it's no problem. No, I think everybody, anytime the community hears from Tony Z, we get excited, and I think we all have to digest a little bit whenever we get something from him as well. But someone mentioned about is Tony Z the brains behind what goes on in CIG, and you have to have brains, right? I think I gave this example on Sunday where I talked about if any of you guys have watched any of the documentaries of how Star Wars is made, George Lucas will come in, he'll talk about a script, a storyboard, he goes through it with everybody, all of his teams, and then when he leaves the room, they sit there and look at each other and say, how do we pull this off? Right? I mean, he brings in the people that know how to do that. George Lucas is not the one who does the model shooting and the filming and all that other stuff. He brings in the people who know how to make it happen or develop it. And in many of the Star Wars films, the technology wasn't there and they created it exclusively. And CIG, as you guys know, has done that with their tools that they've been developing. In this video, Tony showed us all the tools that they've been developing to help do all this tracking and to develop all of this AI subsumption that we keep hearing these words for, but I think this is probably the best presentation that we've seen to get even a better understanding of what Tony Z's been talking about for a while. And we can also see why it took some time to get this in place. So I'm excited with the fact that he mentioned that iCache is ready. That's a great piece for me. The fact that he's saying that they're going to begin the server meshing aspects are going to start. The fact that he talked about the fact that they're going to start bringing in this aspect of the subsumption and AI stuff. We're going to start seeing that. He said in the next patch is the term he used. And I know he's not talking about 13.2. He's probably talking about 3.14. But I'm excited. I'm really excited about what we saw today. Yes, Fast Cart, largely ready. Yes, those were the words that he used. So, Kelosal, is there anything else before we wrap it up that you want to touch on before we close out?
Quantum.
What about it? You ready? You ready for it?
I am reveling in it. I am in my birthday suit, just riding through it like Scrooge McDuck was riding through his money.
All right.
That's how you do it.
I'm not visualizing it, but I'll take your word for it.
Do not visualize that. Do not visualize that.
Yeah, you're a great brother, but
Oh my God. Okay. On that note, thank you for closing us out on that, Kelosal. We appreciate that. Listen, guys, I know that we at the beginning of the show we mentioned that we were planning on doing the Soul Talks on Thursday nights after ISC, but of course this video came out today, and Kelosal and I were like, you know what? This ain't waiting until Thursday. We need to talk about this tonight. So we appreciate it. And Pops and Fist, we appreciate you guys dropping in and giving us your thoughts on what you saw as well. We do want to remind you guys that this Sunday we're doing our follow-up or our review of Invictus Week. It won't be over with yet, but it'll be the day before it's over with. But we are going to kind of talk about what we saw this week and the things that we got really excited about. Captain Wee Wee, good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. But that'll be this week. But Thursday we will be on covering ISC. Is there an ISC this week? I didn't even see the thing for the week. Did they put it out? Is there? Okay. I'm going to assume that there is an ISC this Thursday. If there is, we'll be around. Now, if another video like this drops, CIG could fool us and drop something each day, or maybe another one before Thursday. Kind of look for us. We may pop on and review it, but otherwise we'll be here Thursday. Now, I don't know who will be joining us, but Kelosal was here tonight. GoMab was here last week. So the team just can kind of drop in and sit in on this. So, it's always open to them to be able to come in. And of course, we appreciate you guys coming in and sharing with us as well. So other than that, that's about it. You guys stay safe. Make sure you watch the video one more time so it all sinks in. And hopefully we'll see you guys on Thursday night. Until then, as always, peace, love, and soul.